there's a difference between a me conviction and a we conviction. A me can mean the world to you. And if it doesn't translate beyond you, it's not going to get beyond you. You could say the same thing about a message. You could know that message like the back of your hand, and you could know that inside out. But if that message isn't designed for the person you care for and you're trying to reach, trying to impact, it isn't part of your mission, it's probably not going to go as far as you want.
Everything communicates. So if your team feels misaligned, confused, or maybe even like it's drifting, it might not be a strategy problem. It may be a message problem. And that's our focus on today's episode of Reaching for Remarkable. I'm Brian Taylor, Vice President of Growth at Slingshot Group, where we help you build remarkable teams through staffing and coaching. And today, I'm joined by our CEO, Tim Foote, author of Reaching for Remarkable, and Phil Bowdle from our team at Slingshot. Gentlemen, it is so great to have you both here today.
Thanks, Brian.
All right, let's jump right on in with this. Kicking off this conversation, Tim, by defining this key signature of message. Tell us a little bit more about how you define it and why it's the second key signature for remarkable teams.
Message refers to a compelling and consistent way of communicating what matters most, because everything we do communicates. Everything we do tells a story. Everything we do communicates a message. And often we think about this as external, but it's absolutely just as much internal. In fact, the internal messaging or the story that's being told affects the external.
Yeah. And you make the delineation that a lot of functional teams view communication more like a checkbox, rather than understanding, like you just said, that everything communicates. Can you unpack that a little bit more? Like, why is it important for leaders and teams to move beyond just checking the box?
Right. Firstly, I'll address, you said, why is this a second? Because after conviction, which we talked about in our last episode, message and story and how that conviction is played out and how it communicates is so important. Your team translates your leadership in a certain way, and it's translated not just by what you say, but even more so by what you do. When we're teaching on these 7 key signatures, we often tell the story of Steve Jobs. And most people know this at Apple, that he got ousted in 1985 by his own board.
Yeah. And wasn't a pretty picture.
It wasn't. The own CEO that he hired. And it was because his leadership was telling a bad story. Now, when Steve Jobs came back in 1997, he obviously knew how to tell a better story with his leadership and with the company and the mission of Apple, because they became the Apple that we know today that has effectively changed the world.
The world.
And changed my budget too, quite frankly.
Yeah. Changed the world and the budget. I mean, that's such a powerful picture to see the importance of messaging and how quickly it can twist. It's not just reputation. It's not just, it's literally the inner workings and the outside perception of an organization. One of my favorite of lines or passages in this chapter, Tim says, remarkable teams treat message the same way the best musicians treat sound. Better messaging requires better listening. One of the greatest lessons, Tim, you said, I learned as a musician was that communication isn't just about what you play. It's about what you hear. Phil, you obviously do a lot of work in marketing and messaging and communication. I wonder, why is this so important?
Well, if you're a parent by any chance, you know how important this is when it doesn't work, because you learn as a parent, it's not what you say, it's what somebody else hears. That's effective communication.
Or as a husband or wife, you know.
Yeah, it translates well beyond.
Translates.
No doubt.
Yeah.
No doubt. It translates for how you lead, how you do everything you do if it's something bigger than you. So absolutely, it's much more not just about what you're saying. Although that matters, it's also what is somebody else hearing. So, you know, you mentioned and talk about communication is not a one-way thing. It is not, here's what I want to say, I tell it, everybody hears it. It is a two-way medium now more than ever before, especially when you think about social media, when you think about all the platforms we have to communicate together. It's not just a hope, it's an expectation for people that communication is two-way. So if you aren't careful and clear with your message, it's not going to translate. And if you don't realize that communication is two-way, you're going to think you communicated, and you're going to realize that the person on the other end may have not heard it.
Yeah.
Just like me as a parent, I think last night, it's like, I would love to hear what you just thought
What
you
did
heard.
you just hear me
What did you
say?
just
Yeah.
hear on that? And that is that was a dad check of my message didn't get across. I need to reposition this because this message matters. And so, yeah.
Well, and Phil, wait till you're parenting teenagers.
Not ready to.
It becomes very different.
It's a different ball game.
Yeah, I think what we want people to hear and feel out of this key signature is they always need to be asking the question, what is my leadership communicating? That's the self-awareness part of messaging. The team awareness part of messaging is what message are we sending collectively that communicates our conviction and our mission and helps move it forward? Because often we're communicating messages we don't even realize we're communicating.
Yeah.
And we've got to check. Yeah. We've got to ask. We've got to create feedback.
Yeah.
And often what happens too in the teams we see and observe is they don't even realizing the message they thought they were saying is getting overshadowed by the things that they're doing or the things that they're ignoring, the things they're not saying, because everything communicates, like you say. So it's that when you think about that, the things that it's not just about words, it's not just about a message. It's about looking across your whole team, across your conviction about all that stuff, figuring out, knowing everything communicates, or communicating what really matters.
Yeah, it's often easy to just focus on the people that we're serving in a particular organization, whatever that may be, and forget that internally all the things, all the systems and practices that they all communicate a message. Yes. Hiring, letting people go, onboarding people, developing people, all of it communicates a message.
Phil, you mentioned social media, right? And I was thinking about even what algorithms reward is engagement. Yeah. And a lot of leaders, if they were on a social platform, they're just broadcasting, just putting stuff out, and they're not paying attention to the comment section and not paying attention to what people are saying back to them, which is an indicator of the message that we're receiving. And that kind of plays into the traps that are associated with this particular key signature. All of them involve assumptions of some point. And I think we all know the old adage about what happens when you assume. So we'll leave that, we'll leave that there. But that first trap is when a leader assumes that the message is obvious. Have you ever seen someone like post on social media and then, or you might have posted something and you just assume, oh, this is how people are going to interpret that. Well, the comments tell you a very different story. And we see that happen all the time in organizations. They think the message is obvious, but the people that are listening, the teams, walk away with different and maybe even sometimes conflicting messages. And I would love, Tim, for you to unpack for us in this trap of assuming clarity. Like, what's at stake here?
Yeah. It's interesting you bring up social media, Brian, because I think social media is perhaps shifting a little bit. For a long time there, it was everybody talks, nobody listens. And now posts on social media that get interest are ones where there's actually dialogue and communication happening. When it comes to leadership, it's even more important because as leaders, we're communicating a message. If we just talk and don't create a feedback loop, we're falling into the assumption traps. And I would encourage you to go into the book, read this chapter, because there's a bunch that do address assumptions. But the assuming clarity is a big one. Assuming people that have understood what we have communicated and then walking away and wondering why progress isn't happening. We need to be asking, hey, is what I communicated clear? What was your understanding of this? Can you repeat back to me what you heard? It's dialogue that's confirming whether there's an understanding and not assuming that people care or people understand.
You mentioned like the importance of feedback loops, because I would imagine most leaders that are falling into this trap aren't doing so on purpose. Maybe they're a bit too close to something. Sometimes the lack of clarity is more, they haven't really shown their work. The detail is not there because they're so used to hearing it. They're so used to saying it. They think people are automatically filling in those details. Tim, have you, in the organizations you've worked with, have you seen that show up in a leader who is actually, like, if we go back to self-awareness, team awareness, completely oblivious to the fact that the clarity is not reaching And I want you to help the leader who's listening, who's wondering, oh no, is that me?
Yeah.
Like, what are some of the warning signs that you see when a leader is trapped in assuming clarity?
Here's a scary warning sign.
Hmm.
People nod and don't ask questions. That's the scariest.
Hmm.
The easy one is blank stares and paying attention to that and getting a sense of what's going on in the room. I am blessed with leading a team of leaders who are vocal and will give me instant feedback. You know, one of the things that our team will often say to me is, Tim, is that a statement or is that a question? You know, and that's great to get that real time feedback. But yeah, it's absolutely, if people are just nodding, smiling, you still need to ask, do you understand? I love, you know, as I've been in workshops that you've taught, Brian, you talk about that whole concept of showing your work. Talk a little bit about that.
So when I was growing up, I would get C's in math class.
Brian.
I know, terrible. And I was the kid that was like used to, you know, I was an A student. No, not Phil. Phil did, but I was not a C student. And the problem wasn't my incorrect answer. I would do the work in my head, and I would write the answer on the worksheet, and I would turn it in confident that, of course, I understood this problem and how to do it. And I would get the red pens. I don't know if they're allowed to do it these days, but back in the day, in the 1900s, we had red pens. And in the red pen, the teacher would write the same thing. She'd scribble it or write, show your work, because it was important for her to understand not just where I arrived at, but how I got there. And that's the parallel we see in leaders who are assuming clarity. Maybe they're assuming that the team, the people in the room know how they got there. And sometimes how you get to something makes all the difference for not just the understanding, but in the clarity, but for the acceptance, for them to be able to settle into, especially in change and transition management. So it's important for those leaders to show your work. You kind of brought in, I'm going to go to the third one, assuming understanding, because we're kind of on that thread. I'm interested, you know, Phil, as you think about the importance of a message connecting and what understanding looks like. Tim mentioned the nods and silence and smiles, but no confirmation. How do we help leaders articulate in a way where understanding is inevitable?
You learn the importance of it, but often we learn when it's entirely too late. After we've put our convictions out there, as we thought we were being clear. You know, if you're any kind of communicator in front of people, you felt the blank stares at times, or you felt the questions, or like, oh, I don't know that they got it. And that's what's at stake sometimes, because it fits to this is why it's a perfect layer to the second key signature, is our convictions can be clear, but our message cannot be. And then our mission is at stake. If people don't know how to latch onto it, connect to it, if they don't understand it, then it's not just it's not just a communication thing. No, it's our very message and our very convictions at stake for our mission. So we don't want to wait until it's too late. We are better off. The thing that I often think of is we're better off assuming that just because it's important to us does not mean it's important to somebody else, even though it might be. You're better off assuming people don't care, and you're better off assuming people don't know. If you assume people don't know and don't care, you are forced, as you communicate your message, to be a little bit more intentional, a little bit more clear, a little bit more of listening better, giving a better illustration, helping make sure people don't just hear it, but they get it. And when we do that, we are. It's going to take time. This is often probably one of the areas that people are not super team aware about, because they overlook it. They think, oh, I got it. I could get up and talk 2 hours about it. That doesn't mean the person, in the organization that hasn't heard your 2 hours would be able to say the same thing to somebody else. So there's so much at stake, and we just can't. These assumption traps are so critical because there's a lot at stake here.
It's interesting. I love how you contextualize how important this is, Phil. That our mission, if it's not being communicated, it's going to go sideways or stall. Even it's interesting, real-time example for us at Slingshot Group, as we released this book on reaching for remarkable teams, I had somebody say to me, "Oh, are you moving out of staffing?" And I needed to say to them, absolutely not. That's our core business and our core vehicle for building remarkable teams. We just want them to be healthy. That's why this is our kingdom first priority. And so it was a real-time feedback loop for me of somebody asking that question and me going, that helps shape how we communicate why this is important. We don't want to place leaders on teams that aren't healthy.
Yeah.
But
it was so clear to us on the inside.
Yes.
But to the people who are just kind of watching, and they're only getting clips, sound bites, and moments, that providing that clarity, that understanding, it's important for us to, see it from a different
That's why it's so scary sometimes when when somebody doesn't get it. You're thinking, it was so clear. But you're filling in the gaps so much when you were in those meetings, you were in those conversations, you've been living and breathing this, especially for our nonprofit and our church leaders listening to this. Your full-time work week is dedicated towards this message, towards that conviction, towards your team. But when it gets outside of that room, it can suddenly be like, they've sat with this for 10 seconds, not 10 hours. And we got to do the work, to make it easy for them to hear it and respond to it.
Yeah. So we've talked about these assumptions. So we've hit pretty clearly. The first one was assuming clarity. We've talked about assuming understanding, and we're kind of in that also now, the third trap of assuming care.
Right.
That, just because I'm passionate about it, they're going to be passionate about it. And I think some of the places I've seen this one show up, and you kind of alluded to it with the book, is when leaders are releasing new vision, fresh vision, fresh understanding. I'm thinking of the leader sitting in the office listening to this, and they're maybe a bit deflated because the new initiative they just rolled out kind of went over like a wet blanket and fizzled. Tim, what's your encouragement to that as a visionary leader who, you push us on making sure that we are staying at the leading edge of whatever we're doing. But I'm sure you've had moments where something you've rolled out just didn't quite land. Maybe it landed well, but not as great as you thought it might or would. From your own experience, what would you share with that leader to help them reframe, refocus, and maybe even try again?
Yeah. It mixes our first key signature of conviction. It's connecting the message or the vision or the initiative to stories of how this moves the mission forward. Your biggest tool in your toolbox when it comes to helping people care about what you care about, or when you're talking about new vision or you're revisiting conviction and the mission, is to absolutely tell stories that matter and that bring it to life.
Yeah. Do you have any stories that come to mind? Of course, we can change the names to protect the innocent. But do you have any stories that come to mind that you'd be willing to share? I'm putting you on the spot here.
No, that's fine. I've got two stories for you. First is an internal, and it was a leadership meeting we were having when we were talking about a lot of internal organizational change. We were tweaking to serve our partners better. And then we talked about the timing of releasing a book, and I got a bunch of blank stares. And I had to share why it was important that we do this now, because we'd been doing the work of the book.
Yeah.
And everybody got behind it. But we had to tell the stories of, here's how I see this playing out real time. And then I can remember a specific organization, of course I won't name them, that would have a story time every week. And as part of their gathering at that organization, they would call it story time. And that was when they shared stories of the mission being lived out in the wild, so to speak. Such a powerful example for me of how you keep people connected to the mission and the message, and you keep the message positive.
Yeah, we all need those reminders. I mean, those are a couple really practical things. Phil, any other practical things for teams that are wanting to be effective with their message in the way that they're communicating? What can we learn from together? What can we put to good use?
I'm thinking back to the previous conversation about conviction. there's a difference between a me conviction and a we conviction. A me can mean the world to you, and if it doesn't translate beyond you, it's not going to get beyond you. You could say the same thing about a message. You could know that message like the back of your hand, and you could know that inside out. But if that message isn't designed for the person you care for and you're trying to reach, trying to impact, it isn't part of your mission, it's probably not going to go as far as you want. And I think that's what's heartbreaking. I think for us, often with the teams we talk to, is the discouragement, the frustration of they believe so much in what they are doing, but something is not clicking. They are not either team aware, or they have not focused on this of communicating a message they can get beyond them. And so I think I said it before, there's a lot at stake with this. This isn't just something you can cruise by and because of my a lot of work in communications, it's not something you can outsource.
Right.
It's not somebody's job. Messaging is everybody's job.
Right.
Everybody has a role to play. It's not like something that you
Because
can
everything,
tell me
like we
what
said,
to say.
everything communicates. That means everyone communicates.
Well, and speaking of that, it truly comes to life for us in our staffing work. Because when we are searching for a new person to join that team, it's vital that conviction and that mission is communicated in a compelling way. And it's crystallized in that process. Likewise, when we walk into a team environment and we see somebody that perhaps needs to transition off because there's no conviction anymore or even belief anymore.
Yeah, their presence on the team is communicating something that the organization doesn't want broadcast.
Right.
Well, to get super practical too, from a good exercise at some point might be write down all the statements and all the phrases and all the language and the messaging that you use internally, and just write it down on a document.
That's good.
When you do that, you might be surprised by how big that document is. And you might have that might be a step towards becoming more aware of not assuming that everybody gets all this stuff. Because this happens all the time. I just was talking with the team last week that they're like, man, these new people, they just aren't. It was basically, they're not as convicted as we were when we started this place. We did, they don't get it. They don't own it like we do. Well, they've had shared history of that message and those convictions for years. Somebody stepping on the team hasn't lived that journey. You haven't told a story to invite them into. It's just your story.
It's on you.
It's on you. So something you can do is break down those assumptions of assuming everybody knows this stuff. And if it's too much for a new person to know, it might be time to spend some message work on clarifying that, to actually make it something that can go beyond you and communicate your mission well.
Yeah, I remember we were preparing to start a search, our team was, and I happened to be there in the room, and there were so many, it's going to sound so simple, but there were so many acronyms.
Yeah.
Like they were referring to things as a combination of letters and numbers. And after about the 20th time, I'm like, can you just tell me what that means? Because as an outsider, every time you do it, I'm not actually getting to know you better. Right. I'm actually feeling more and more pushed out. And I would imagine new leaders joining a team that's trying to rally around the mission, even that sense of kind of like an insider language can prevent understanding. It can prevent clarity, because we might think that acronym means something different. So I think it's important for us to pay attention to that.
It prevents that, and it also communicates an us and them.
Yeah.
And that's the last thing you want when you're building a team.
Yeah, that's so good. Guys, this has been an amazing conversation. Clearly, this is something we're convicted about. It matters so deeply. And I thank you both for the stories and I think we're going to help a lot of people really land their message well.
Well, I think too, people that are even listening today to think about, okay, how do we have a better listening culture?
Yeah.
Like, what are the questions we need to ask today to get a grasp on clarity and feedback loops?
Well, we can learn. Something I've learned a ton from you is your superpower of curiosity. You write about that in the book. That is incredible two-way listening when you become curious, and you can make some dangerous assumptions when you aren't when you don't care about what somebody else would say, or like it's staying curious. And this is critical, probably in every signature,
Yes.
but this one especially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that-
Well, and it's circling back to the Steve Jobs story. You know, he post 2006 in his, I think it was his Stanford University commencement address. He said, "You can't connect the dots looking forward." Well, we know that you can. Somebody does.
Yeah.
You can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards.
Huh.
It's feedback loops. It's what do we learn? It's what do we learn about the history? It's when we're coming to a situation, what are the questions we need to ask? How do we approach this with curiosity? How do we do a communications audit today to really get to the bottom of what kind of message is being communicated by how we operate?
Yeah. That's so good. I think that's a very fitting place for us to close today's conversation. And again, thank you both for being here. And thank you for joining us today. And if you want to go deeper on message and the other 6 signatures, be sure to grab a copy of Reaching for Remarkable at reachingforremarkable.com. Now, next episode, we're talking about culture, and I cannot wait for that conversation. So be sure to subscribe to the podcast and share it with a friend. And until then, stay curious and reach for remarkable.